there's billions of dollars in federal money flowing into the Department of Education. They're spending that money on things now. There has to be a dialogue of what happens when that money goes away. Are you going to cut all of those programs? And if you're not, then we got to find the money to pay for them. That dialogue isn't happening, and you're going to wait till you get to the end, and then it's going to be, oh, well, how are you going to pay for this? Right? Somebody cut it. No, nobody cut it. You were spending it one-time dollars for these programs. That accounting has to start now, so that when those monies eventually go away, you've planned for them to go away. I don't think that's happening at all right now. I think that, you're just spending and you're moving along, and a lot of resource, a lot of money papers over a lot of things. But that's the kind of dialogue that we need to be having now. And that's what this kind of starts to accelerate that. Because at some point, actually look at those federal dollar charts that I'll show you, and that doesn't even include, some of all of the federal funds. But when those funds start to run off, some of it's being spent by the government. We need to understand what the spending level is going to be. Well, we don't want to have a crisis then, right? Well, the federal money ran out, and what are we going to do about these programs? Let's identify them now, let's talk about them now, let people know what it is, and start planning for it. And I use this year as an example. This year, we passed the budget on June 31st. We think the budget was in line with revenues and balanced. But by November and December, the legislature had passed over $1 billion more impacting the financial plan, outside of the budget. So you can't have a budget process where you agree on a budget, this is how much we're spending, this is how much we have, and then you ignore the budget, and then you pass $1 billion after. The $1 billion is comprised of about $200 million in spending and over $700 million in the tax reductions that were proposed. We're actively working with the government to come up with a compromise, but the point is that when you pass the budget, you should pass the budget, and then the budget's done. And if there are other things that you want to spend priorities on, you go and you renegotiate, figure out, and identify the funds. But just adding $1 billion in spending without any discussion on how you're going to pay for it goes back to the charts I showed you earlier, where you pass a budget and then you just spend without figuring out how you're going to pay for it. We'll figure it out later. That doesn't work, and that's not being fiscally responsible. And how that's happening is because the government submits a plan, we say we work with them, yes or no, on certain things, and then we assume the legislature is going to stay within that. This table will show there are a lot of spending priorities that are out there that if you had to address them all, you would be at deficits this year. You'd be at deficits next year, because there's a lot of pressure, and I'll go through them, right? There is the tax reform bill, right? That alone was $500 million a year. You have potentially a debt settlement that is on the table that we're looking at. We have the cost of the earned income tax credit, right, is close to $200 million more than was originally anticipated. There's a desire to spend all of the federal money that we have available to us on the Medicaid side. If you do that, we have a match. So we'll have to spend more in order to do that. It may be a good idea to do, but it's not accounted for right now. There were a lot of ongoing expenses, including in the Department of Education, but a lot of other agencies that were being used. ARPA funds, other federal funds were being used because they were not part of the budget. But those were for recurring expenses. So we're using one-time federal dollars to pay for ongoing expenses. Now, we don't want to be in a position to say we're going to cut those, but if you don't want to, then we're just going to have to figure out how to find the money for it. In our opinion, that's a priority because you've already made commitments on it, but you made commitments on it with resources that you didn't have. You made commitments on it with federal dollars, so now we're going to have to find general fund dollars to make up for it.